Welcome to the November Poverty and Homelessness Board Executive Committee meeting. Before we do introductions, I have asked other members of the Poverty and Homelessness Board to join us today as we have discussions about the changes with the NOFA and what we're going to do moving forward. So we will give everybody from the Poverty and Homelessness Board time to join in the conversation with the executive team as we move forward. If you're a community member, we ask that you put your information in the chat box or you sign up for public comment, as I'm going to be focusing on the PHB members in the conversations and as we're going through today, because we have such a short time frame to get out information, to have talks and make decisions. I want to make sure that we're able to have a robust discussion and planning. Okay, and with that, I move forward with introductions, and if board members want to introduce themselves and Lane County staff, start with you, Matthias.
I'm Matthias Smith. I am the youth representative for PHB.
My name is Sherry Walton, and I am voting member in the lived experience role. And if I can stop coughing, I will stay here so we can maintain quorum.
All right, we'll do everybody in the room, then we'll go on.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Kim Locks, Scepter representative, and I'm with Hope and Safety Alliance.
I'm Andrea Brandon, she, her pronouns, outreach and coordinated entry at Lane County Human Services. Amanda Borda, I'm a senior program services coordinator with Lane County and COC lead.
Hi, I'm Jim Zio. I'm the Homelessness Community Action Manager with Lane County.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Sean Van Gordon, Mayor of Springfield.
Mayor Knudsen.
Hi, everyone. Mayor Karen Knudsen, City of Eugene. Nice to see you all.
Genevieve.
Hi, I'm Jen Schock. I'm the Poverty and Homelessness Board.
Mike.
Hi, Mike Fleck. I'm a sector representative on the board, working at Community Sharing in Cottage Grove.
And Wakan.
Yeah, hi, Wakan Alferez with Homes for Good.
If we missed anyone that's on the Poverty and Homelessness Board, could you please let us know? Okay, thank you, everyone. Great, and do we have anything in the queue for public comment? thank you. All right, and then executive committee, can we have a motion for the consent agenda?
A motion.
Thank you, Matthias. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Why not?
Thank you. As soon as it came, I'm like, oh, I did that backwards. Thank you, everyone. All right, so we're going to move on to the funding update.
Here. Hello, everyone. Here I am again to present a disappointing funding update to you all, but I think it's important that we just, I think it's important that we just are transparent and that we're having these conversations. Amanda's the bulk of this meeting is gonna be about the HUD. No, so I'm not gonna touch on federal funding, but Amanda's gonna be talking about that piece of it in depth. So just to make sure this group is kind of fully up to date on where we're at with the state funding. So this, I'm sharing, right? Yeah. So this slide shows where we're at with our homelessness prevention, diversion, and long-term rent assistance funding. So one thing to note is that these are the funding allotments for this year are for the biennium, so it's for 2 years. And so when we're comparing fiscal year 25 with fiscal year 26 and 27, just keep in mind that's 2 years compared with 1 year. So you'll see a large reduction in funding for homelessness prevention coming from the state this year. As we've discussed, I believe in this board, that's largely the state legislature feeling that there were other resources to address homelessness prevention, such as the HRSN benefit and just other resources. And so they decided to not invest as heavily in homelessness prevention this year. Our diversion funding has remained largely the same. That funding source is ORI, the Oregon Rehousing Initiative. And so our diversion funds, which, again, briefly are really flexible, low barrier ways to get folks who have housing identified into housing. And so it's been a really successful program, and we're happy to see that funding continue. We did finally learn our long-term rental assistance allocation. It is slightly less than we have previously received for that program. We are working forward with the providers to account for that reduction. There are some changes to programming that we may be able to do to help with that. One example being we previously have paid the first 3 months just in full for folks that are enrolled in that program, but we likely will move to folks that have income immediately starting to contribute to their contribute to the subsidy. So there's some other things that MAC group and the LTRA task group are working through to help mitigate the reduction in funding. And as I know you are all aware, probably the biggest hit or gap this year is in our emergency shelter funding. Emergency shelter funding, unlike the categories I just mentioned, we are being funded on a fiscal year basis, so it's not a biennium. So the funding is for this fiscal year, so through June 30 of 2026. We are seeing a reduction of 11 million from last fiscal year down to 7.6 million. There was a joint press release released yesterday between Lane County and the city of Eugene that some of you may have seen that outlined some of these impacts. What we're seeing is 60 overall fewer state-funded shelter beds. We're seeing 3 fewer state-funded shelters. And I want to be clear, I know there was some confusion, I think, that was caused by the press release. Shelter Care is not closing their medical respite shelter at 969. They are able to sustain it with other funding outside of state funding. So I think some of the language in that press release kind of led to people to think that program was closing, and it is not. Harriet Forward Sandbox Shelter, and then Equitable Social Solutions Garden Way Shelter are 2 shelters that are closing. I will say, and I believe this is accurate as of today, we have been successful in getting all of the shelter residents transferred to other shelters if that was what they were looking to do.
I can confirm that for ours.
Great.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that. So, there has also been a cost to agencies as far as their staffing. 32.3 full-time FTE staff had their positions, either lost their positions with those agencies completely, or for some, they were able to move to other positions within that agency. As I think the county, we have 2 program service coordinators that are no longer on our team as a part of this reduction in funding as well. And along with it, a significant detriment is that the shelters are no longer going to be able to have dedicated housing-focused staff and supports for those shelter residents. We anticipate we will see fewer transitions from shelter into housing, less turnover in shelters because of that. Siemens and DePaul is anticipating in regards to Egan that they will be reducing to 3 Egan sites. They are working to finalize those sites, and they will be working with about a 50% reduction for Egan. I don't want to speak for Siemens DePaul. I don't know if Jack has hopped on, but I know they are actively working to identify ways to mitigate that reduction. And so, I don't have any more detail than that at the moment, but I know they are doing all they can to help keep as much of that, as much of Egan as they can. And obviously, I know Egan is a very well supported program in our community, and hopefully there'll be some opportunities for the community that as well. And then, which was also, I believe, included in the press release, we did learn yesterday that unfortunately the e-board request that we have been mentioning in many meetings, which was a request to the emergency board at the state to fill the gap in funding. It was Lane County, Multnomah County, Crook County, Marion County, maybe missing a county there, had submitted a request asking for the funding to be contributed. And we learned that e-board request was not going to move forward to the e-board. I did just shortly before this meeting heard from some county leadership that there may be a chance to resubmit it, and that there may be some changes to the state's budget that have come about as of late, but I really don't know more than that at this time, so can't offer anything more than that. So that is where we are at with the state-specific funding. There will be an opportunity, with the shelter funding just being for this fiscal year, there will be an opportunity in, June, July for that funding to potentially, return to the amounts that we had been receiving. And so we look forward to that as a potential opportunity. Happy to field any questions from the board. And again, Amanda's going to be getting into the federal COC funding landscape, so.
Questions or discussion?
Just a note from the Association of Oregon Counties. I just got this message this morning, which you may have heard, that AOC, our executive committee, met with the governor yesterday after breakfast. Have you heard any of that news?
I have not.
Regarding CFAA negotiations specifically. And as a result of the Counties United Front, we're working on a December 8th small group meeting with the governor and her staff. With I think 3 counties will be involved in that discussion, but representing all 36 counties. And when we all talk together on this issue, we're absolutely unanimous, 36-0. When we talk together, we've got a powerful voice.
Just for clarity, can you tell me a little bit about what you're hoping to get and what that meeting will be about?
Well, we've been given a contract to sign that no county agrees with from OHA. That is, it's simply it. I'm not going to point fingers. I'm not going to say anything nasty about the people who I adore in Salem, but they're taking care of their own issues and shifting the burden to counties, and we all agree with that. So we have a strong council representation, SEL representation, and I think, yeah, I have faith in Governor Kotek. I do, but I don't know how much, how heavy a club she can carry for this. So we'll see what happens. There may be, yesterday morning, we thought all hope was dead. Yesterday by noon, we thought, well, maybe there's a breath, but we'll see.
I just have a question about the shelter beds. How many of those are youth related, or if there are any reduction?
I believe we've not seen reduction in youth beds. Looking Glass was able to kind of move some things around. And Kirsten, I think you're on, so if anything I'm saying is wrong, please correct me. But none of those beds are youth specific beds.
Any other questions? Or discussion topics?
There is one other thing I'll mention, since I'm fresh off all 36 counties are over there right now. We have a local government advisory committee, which meets once a month is Oregon Health Authority and Association of Oregon County, but also the behavioral health and other directors will be there. We meet on the 5th of December, and in that meeting, Dr. Hathi will be there. Dr. Hathi, Director Bell will be there, along with along with Eve Gray, who's a member of the LGAC, and I chair that committee. So we have a chance to talk directly to the directors, and any input that we can get from Poverty and Homelessness Board give real spice to the conversation. When I say spice, I mean salinity, not taste of the conversation.
How long have you got?
Well, it's I have the gavel, so we can go all day. Oh, you mean here?
Well, and I think before, because I can't remember, but we had discussed, and I might be in a different meeting, about how if you want to give information about numbers of individuals, but also specific impacts that it will have, or if you're losing funding, like specific success, maybe if some funding was cut and you're able to go back to say, we were able to move this many people from shelter to housing and this one. So whatever you can provide that we can give to the state to say, this is going to lead to this gap. And we had our successes, or this is going to lead to this gap where people who could have been successful in these programs and could be safe are now at risk.
And Chair Murphy, the personal stories really carry a lot of weight. And then Brian, from your years of experience at talking about people and actual situations more than numbers and graphs, is this is a picture of this family, and this is what happened to this family based on this. It really is powerful.
Pat, can I send that stuff to you since you're the one going to the
You
meeting?
can.
Okay.
And you can, yes.
Okay.
You can copy Director Gray if you'd like, but
Thank you, everyone.
I'm sure James would love to be in that loop too, but
I tried to promise them that I would try to move stuff to other people potentially for the next 8 weeks.
Everything goes to James.
And with that, we're going to pass it. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Chair, I was about to apologize. I just raised my hand as the screen changed, so my apologies for not hitting that button sooner. I just wanted to share to the executive committee something that I have been talking about with our executive staff at the city, which is that I do think from evidence and recent history, certainly the city of Eugene has been very engaged in the statewide work to stand up the Sustainable Shelter Funding Bill. We have great partnerships with our county partners in this work. And I do think that looking into the future, it's going to be increasingly important for all communities and across our state to really be able to see the quality and the efficiency and the effectiveness of the work that is happening here in Lane County. And as it specifically relates to our emergency shelter work, I think also given the extraordinary resource constraints that we're facing, the effectiveness and the fiscal responsibility that is attached in terms of average cost per bed and the effectiveness of that work. So I just wanted to say to this group that I think it is important that we share the successes that we've had here and that we also be speaking into the future as an example of what it might look like to have say, a more consistent statewide allocation in terms of funding per bed. and that this is a place where other jurisdictions could learn to be as efficient with every single dollar that we have learned how to be in the city of Eugene and with Lane County. So that sounds like a small project and could be also a communications project, but I think it's going to be really important for us to assemble that information looking into this coming year.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just had that conversation at another meeting where it's like, as the entity that is contracted with the company that is providing the services, that there's more power when it is not coming from us who are getting the money. And so we talked about that in mental health and in other places of, like, as a mental health provider, there's more power when family members and consumers discuss with the stakeholders and funders about how important these services and resources are than when I do it. So partly because that's my job and partly because I'm asking for money. So and everybody has to be fiscally, they have their responsibilities, but that the power really is coming from the folks who do the work and the folks who benefit from the work. So
I have to interject. Don't undersell yourself, Chair Murphy. You have one of the more powerful voices that we have regionally. And now that you're the chair of this particular board, which, and Dan, you were on the original board, that this board was picked for the matrix is picked for a particular reason, but the power and strength that you're able to convey through your voice, it really is huge. And the members that are sitting in the room and the members online right now, the Poverty and Homelessness Board carries a great deal of weight through the chair's voice.
anything else before we turn it over to Amanda? All right, Amanda, it looks like you're on. Okay.
Okay. I think I already introduced myself, but I am Amanda Borda, the COC lead for those online. So HUD released our very long-awaited HUD Continuum of Care Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, on November 13th. It is due January 14th. That is a very, very quick turnaround, and given that there are many holidays in between now and then, it's even shorter for actual work days. We'll talk more about that timeline in a moment. The funding available is approximately $3.9 billion, and part of that funding is divided into several other buckets. So there's $228 million for Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, or YHDP renewal projects. There is $129 million of that for renewal of the supplemental NOFO projects. We did not receive that award. That was an additional NOFO a couple years ago. And at least $52 million for domestic violence bonus project. And so outside of those, the remainder is what is available for sort of other projects, renewal and new. The COC application is still made up of the three parts. So there's a COC consolidated application, there's the project applications, and then there's the priority listing, also known as the ranking. So the actual COC application is that narrative part that we complete that demonstrates sort of our strategies and our performance as a continuum. And then the project applications are for those individual projects. So all of that remains the same as previous years. So tier one, there are a number of major changes within this notice. So I'm going to go through a lot of those. There are so many, we probably won't be able to go through all of them, to be honest. So I encourage everyone to kind of read through the detail of the NOFO, and the National Alliance also has a very nice summary that they put out very quickly. So if you kind of have trouble deciphering things in the NOFO, it's a lot of jargon. So the National Alliance does a good job of summarizing that so it's easy to understand. But some of the major highlights are that tier one is limited to just 30% this year. That was previously 90%. In the last year, and has been hovering around 90 to 95% always. So we'll talk more about that. That is tier one as part of our ranking process. Permanent housing, which includes permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and joint transitional housing and rapid rehousing, is limited to just 30% of our annual renewal demand. Currently, those projects make up probably close to 75%, so a big difference. Transitional housing and supportive services only, including outreach projects, are again prioritized. These are two models that have not been funded through the continuum of care since 2013. So they are bringing back sort of these models that had been phased out. Youth homelessness demonstration projects are also ranked competitively this year. That in the past, those were awarded non-competitively. So those will be in the same ranking and mixed with all of the other projects. There is an increase to the amount available for new bonus projects. So that's 20% of our final pro rata need, or FPRN. That was previously 12. There is a merit review that replaces typical COC scoring. So the COC scoring within the application, the narrative portion, is very different than it has been in previous competitions. So we'll talk about that. There is also an expanded risk review that applies to all projects, and we'll also talk about what that means. So due to the long delay in getting this out, we typically have already submitted it prior to November. So since it is so late, we are not likely to hear about those awards until at least April or May. HUD has indicated close to May. So that is already halfway through the year that this competition funds, just so that we're aware.
Try and run a business like that.
Luckily, a lot of our projects start in July or later in the year, but we do have some that start earlier. And, we will not receive grant agreements in May. That will be awards. So there is still several months usually to get grant agreements, get them signed, and actually get funding is probably going to be close to the end of that year. Yeah. This year, that took several months. So just be aware.
But if I may, a question from Amanda, the merit review, who's determined the criteria regarding the merit?
We'll walk that through and what that means. Yeah. That's just sort of the language they're using to kind of push forward some of the priorities that they have.
Just let me. Board members, by all means, speak up. So don't wait for me to call on you. And James will help me monitor, but just to keep the discussion going, just go ahead and speak up.
Yeah, if there are questions that are, immediate to something I'm talking about, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, there is some time at the end as well for just kind of a discussion of all of it, because there's a lot here. So overall application amounts, just so you are aware of these numbers, the tier 1, like I said, is just 30%. So it is 2,050,063. Tier 2 is the remainder of the annual renewal demand that is not in tier 1, as well as YHDP, and plus any amounts that are available for bonus. So that's about 6.1 million. Our ARD is 6.8. Part of that is YHDP, which is 1.8 million. The bonus amount we are eligible for is 1.3 million. That is new money that we do not have currently. And the planning amount for this year is 341,677. That is not ranked, so that is separate from those other numbers. Our total application that will be submitted is likely to be somewhere around 8.5 million. That's if we apply for all funding that is available. There is also, I did not put on here, there's also DV bonus amount that is available. As of now, we don't intend to apply for that amount. It's about 160,000, which is not very much. And the project types that are eligible, it wouldn't go very far. So we can always talk about that if folks are interested, but we do not currently have a plan to RFP that amount.
I was reading through the NOFO and it said that only 20% could be for new projects. And so I was curious, are they talking about those bonus and DV new projects, or are they talking about the transitional and supportive services? Like, because we don't have those programs funded by this, would those be considered new and under that 20% limit?
So the 20% is that bonus money that's available. So that's new money that we do not currently have. There are also going to be new projects, but those will have to come from the money that we currently have. So we anticipate Likely about 40% of our permanent housing is going to be reallocated to other project types because I'll get to that in a minute about the ranking, but there's not, it's sort of a forced reallocation because there's not much incentive to put more than 30% of permanent housing in your ranking. So HUD's policy priorities, they always include these in the NOFO and kind of allow us to understand the direction that they plan to go, the things that you will see reflected in the COC application and the requirements. So generally these have stayed roughly the same. They might introduce a couple of new priorities like when they introduced equity as a priority and when they introduced cooperation with health entities. This year, they are all completely different and going in a very different direction than HUD has previously gone. So this administration and HUD have a very different direction that they would like to go with this program. So some of these reflect some of the recent news you might have seen or the executive orders. You'll see that language throughout. The first one is ending the crisis of homelessness on our streets. So this really reflects directing resources to outreach, intervention, and assistance to regain self-sufficiency, as well as working with law enforcement to reduce encampments, public camping, and public drug use. That's really aligned with that executive order of ending crime and disorder on America's streets, I believe it's called. If you haven't read that, I would suggest it. It has a lot of implications for the work that we do. The next is prioritizing treatment and recovery. So this is reflecting that HUD would like to see a lot more emphasis on treatment for substance use and prioritizing projects that include that treatment. Advancing public safety. So again, this reflects cooperation with law enforcement to advance public safety as it relates to encampments. Promoting self-sufficiency. So this relates to the emphasis that they have on primarily employment and in improving employment and increasing employment income in particular. So not income in general, but specific to employment income. There's also a lot of language about really moving on from government assistance, so moving to unsubsidized housing and fully off of government assistance. Improving outcomes. So we'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about the criteria, but this reflects that COCs should review all eligible projects and determine their effectiveness and should prioritize projects that essentially align with what is in this NOFO. And that they will be heavily scrutinizing the projects that you are submitting for what you have achieved in the past. Minimizing trauma. I find this one to be ironic because a lot of what it puts forth could be very traumatizing, but this one is about minimizing trauma and utilizing trauma-informed care, especially as it relates to survivors of domestic violence, youth, and women. So some of the merit review scoring criteria, so these reflect a lot of the things that we saw in the COC builds NOFO that was re-released that we had anticipated we might see here as well. And so they are included and as sort of priorities or requirements for the new project types that we will submit. And so that includes serving elderly and physically disabled individuals. So this is essentially further limiting the population that they would like to see PSH serving. So you'll notice that it says physically disabled. Currently, the definition of disabled includes physically disabled as well as substance use disorder and mental illness. This specifically calls out that substance use disorder is not considered a disability. Mental illness is actually not mentioned, and so there's a lot of question about where that falls, and there's a lot of suspicion that that is also not included in this, that they really want to see PSH dedicated to elderly and physically disabled individuals. Providing robust wraparound services. This speaks to the fact that they would like to see on-site services for all projects, as well as substance use services on-site. Requiring supportive service participation. So this will review whether our projects currently require supportive services as well as requires any new projects submitted to require supportive services and participation in them. The next one is related. They also are requiring that projects have full-time services, 40 hours per week, that are individualized and customized to each person, that can only be reduced proportionally for hours of employment that that individual might have. So that is quite a lot and there's a lot of questions out there from COCs around what that means. And what exactly that has to be provided for that amount of time. So that is the information we have about that one so far. Promoting recovery. So we've already seen a lot of language around no harm reduction, emphasis on treatment. There's also an emphasis on reducing returns. So they really want to see a very small percentage of folks return to the system after 24 months. As well as protecting public safety. So that reflects, again, some of those laws prohibiting drug use in public camping, as well as whether we have standards to address individuals who are a danger to themselves, specifically involuntary commitment, and if we substantially implement SORNA, which is sort of national standards around sex offender registration. The state of Oregon does not currently meet those standards for being considered fully implementing SORNA. So what does this all mean for us? Locally, 5.7 million in COC funding currently supports permanent housing. So that includes all of those program types that I mentioned. That would now be limited to just over 2 million. So we anticipate about 3.7 and some change is going to be reallocated to transitional housing supportive services only projects. There will be added requirements around supportive services offered and requirements on behalf of participants to participate in them. We cannot use harm reduction. They're really emphasizing no housing first in having treatment requirements, both being offered and participated in, as well as, again, that emphasis on employment, sobriety, and movement off of government assistance. So the overall change of direction and kind of an about face for COCs from what we have been doing for over a decade or more, really completely changing what the priorities are and requirements are of the COC. Questions about that part?
No, we do that.
So on the ground, like in real time, like where I work right now, we are moving a lot of our participants into the BOB. So does that mean that that's no longer permanent supported housing for them, or what does that mean?
Good question. So we don't yet know which projects are going to be reallocated, right? We do have 30%, so we can preserve some in tier 1 likely. We don't know which projects those will be. That will have to be a very important discussion around strategy of which projects we want to keep. That being said, there may be, so there will be some permanent supportive housing likely. That being said, they may have, if they are funded, they have different supportive service requirements that are not totally in line with sort of housing first and our previous direction. So it depends on what projects continue and which don't.
So does that mean that folks that have been, like, let's say living somewhere like the Mill for the last 2.5 years suddenly might not be permanent supported housing anymore?
If they no longer, if those projects don't get submitted, they might not receive COC funding. They may have funding from other sources that can maintain that project. So there is state funding for permanent supportive housing services, or some programs are likely to close and the individuals in those programs will have to be exited. We do not yet know what that number is until we know which projects are going to be affected.
And Amanda, again, I was trying to find the hand raise button. I couldn't find it, but I just to be able to jump in on kind of the current place-based permanent supportive housing funding to the question that I can't exactly see who mentioned that, but for the current Homes for Good sites that are project-based voucher OHCS funded, and that includes the NO, the Commons and MLK, Bridges on Broadway. In the Keystone, we received sufficient exterior funding that it wouldn't like dramatically impact those programs. So we do not anticipate anybody would lose their housing. staffing levels, service levels. I think that's the point of discussion at this point for those sites.
And mine is just a general point, and if we go back to merit review, scoring criteria and priorities, the first, I didn't get past the first bullet, which is serving elderly and physically disabled individuals, emphasis on serving a limited population. My contention, our contention should be that substance use causes physical disability. And that, so what I would worry about, what I'd be concerned about and peaked on is, are people disqualified by substance abuse?
That reads that way. And that's one of the points that is sort of under legal review by quite a number of COCs and the National Alliance. That's one of the points that not only does it not align with statute and regulations, but it doesn't align with, discrimination law around disability. We typically can't discriminate based on type of disability. And so there are a number of questions about whether that is even allowed.
Then I won't beat that to death at this point in time, but you know, the physical disabilities caused by substance use are tangible, measurable.
Right, and many folks we know have, co-occurring disabilities, quite a number in our system. So it's unclear sort of how that also goes out.
Well, I'll have a lot more questions as we go through that, but I won't belabor this meeting with it.
I thought the same thing. It's like, well, mental health, you can get Social Security and be disabled for mental health.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions around the mental, it's not even mentioned, so there's many questions around where they intend to place that. And I will say too that HUD did have a webinar like they usually do. It was one slide. It did not answer any questions. It was very much reiterating the things that they would like to see, and yeah, they were not really entertaining anything to the contrary. So there was not a lot of information beyond what is in the NOFO, or really any. So we did not receive any explanation until we receive sort of the detailed instructions, which are not yet posted. We don't have any other information than the language that is here.
And there's no medium for questions at this point.
There is an email, and so we've already submitted multiple questions. I don't know if anyone has received any responses as of yet. I have many questions into them. So this is what the overall COC application scoring looks like as that sort of merit review summary. So it's similar categories. You'll see that the criterion there are similar to previous years. However, many of the questions within them are completely different, and the scoring structure is different. So typically our application is about 200 points. This is 130. So that means there's a lot more weight to each question, and how the points are sort of divvied up is very different. System performance is usually more points. Some of that stuff has been, a lot of the merit criteria, things I've talked about, are in that COC coordination and engagement section. There's also policy preference points for projects that will verify immigration status for 100% of participants, as well as opportunity zone preference points for those who have at least 50% of activities within an opportunity zone. I don't believe we will meet that criteria. So some of the new scoring criteria, I just want to highlight some of the things that are very different that are outlined in the NOFO, and some of which have pretty high point values. So you'll see that first one, 100% of projects have participation requirements in order to get full points. That's 10 points. In the application, usually things are like 2 to 3, like having 10 points for a question is quite high in the past, but you'll see that the way that they're weighting questions is quite skewed. The next one is reduction of encampments. So we would have to demonstrate a reduction in the number of people residing in encampments by at least 20%. We don't even currently really track encampments. There's not a definition of what an encampment is. And it's certainly not tracking the number of people in encampments. So I don't think that we will be able to demonstrate that. We were looking into ways we might try. 40 points for system performance. This includes objective criteria that needs to be at least 50% of our ranking score. Previously, that was 30%. There are 17 out of 40 of those points are solely for demonstrating a reduction in your pit count. So as we know, we do not see a reduction in our pit count. Most COCs do not. And so that one, so that's 17 points we will not get. I'll just tell you that. And you know, HUD has the pit count data, so they know almost no one will score on that question. So I'll just say that's intentional. Demonstrating participant exits to unsubsidized housing. That's not something we have had to demonstrate before. We are looking into what that number is. I think the threshold for points is 20%. I don't think that we have at least 20% exiting to unsubsidized locations.
Amanda, can I ask, so some of the programs where you can take the voucher with you, you cannot take the voucher with you?
This is looking at basically exiting without, to rental without subsidy, maybe family, friends, permanent tenure, not anything that has to do with subsidy.
Okay.
So they're gonna help us build a whole lot of new places, right?
I don't know yet. We're looking at pulling this number. I don't know where it lands because we've not really looked at that in that way before. Increase for points again for low returns to homelessness. So meeting thresholds on that, as well as meeting outcomes on jobs and income growth. So typically the system performance is sort of even in terms of the system performance measures. This time the points are skewed to those two outcomes a little higher than the others. There are also 16 points for this section on availability of treatment and recovery services. So again, this to get these points, we'd have to show substance use treatment available on site for at least 30% of projects. I don't know that most or any of ours have what they're looking for there in terms of attached agreements or letters that require that. The creation or existence of projects with the purpose of providing substance use treatment and attached documentation to show that. Providing a list of beds for which these criteria apply and having a certain threshold of beds within our population size, as well as a 24/7 access to detox or inpatient treatment, formal partnerships with
Certified community behavioral health clinics
and mental health clinics. This is something we're looking into. I don't know that we would have that in place prior to January. Availability of sober housing and showing adequate supportive services commitment through match, a value of 50% of our ARD, or 30% of proposed funding is used for services relative to ARD. 6 points for street outreach, so just slightly different criteria here, increasing the number that exit to a positive destination, as well as partnering with first responders and law enforcement. And then 13 points, so again, high number about protecting public safety. So this, we have to demonstrate that laws that prohibit public drug use and enforcement, that applies to the entire geographic area of the COC. So that would not just be City of Eugene, that likely would look to state law because we have to show that it applies to our entire geographic area, as well as the one about public camping and enforcement. So that would relate to the state law around public camping. Demonstrate utilization of standards that address individuals, including involuntary commitment. I believe there are some standards at the state level. I don't know what we will have to do in terms of demonstrating utilization of those standards, specific to people who are unhoused. And then again, that one about SORNA, we will not receive points for that. So it's unclear. We'll have to see what the directions say about these questions. It's unclear if we will receive these points and what the sort of threshold is for what they mean by enforcement is a question. I don't know. Right, we can demonstrate what laws are on the books, but I don't know how to exactly demonstrate whether things are enforced and what they define that as, right? So yeah, these are still very unknown. So some key takeaways, it will, it will be nearly impossible to implement this large of sort of a shift in policy and direction for our continuum prior to submission. So we're really answering these based on what is in place today, right? We can't sort of rush to make sure that, right, everyone provides substance use treatment or, these are things that take, time to implement and sort of shift our entire system will not occur. So a lot of this we will not score on, and we will likely see a very low score on the COC application. And in many ways, HUD is penalizing COCs for following previous policy requirements that HUD required. We're now like being penalized for under this program. So I'll just say too on that point, there's a lot of indication from, the National Alliance and others that this is quite intentional. HUD is making it clear they would like to fund new applicants. They would like to fund projects that have not been in existence. They don't believe that the folks that have been doing this work are doing it well. And they would like to sort of get rid of it and start over is sort of the messaging. So I think a lot of that scoring is very intentional. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means when we get to the end. So for project applications, so there are new project opportunities because we will have to do a reallocation as well as we have that bonus amount. Lane County will be issuing requests for proposals for transitional housing, supportive services only, as well as outreach. And then there are some YHDP funds that need to be shifted, and those will be supportive services only diversion. So all new projects are going to have to meet several different review levels, including eligibility, threshold, and project quality. And all new projects must align with the priorities in the NOFO and meet those minimum requirements that we kind of talked about. So there are a number of sort of reviews that projects will have to go through that is much more in-depth than previous. Turnaround for the RFPs is going to be very fast given the timelines that we have through HUD, and applications are always due to the COC 30 days before the deadline. So that is December 15th, or December 14th really. So these will all need to be due prior to that date just to meet HUD requirements. And again, there's emphasis on funding new agencies and faith-based agencies. There is an opportunity for transition grants. This is essentially a way to transition from one program component to another. And it gives you a 1-year period to sort of make that change so that it's not overnight. So we will be looking at opportunities where this might be effective and might help us transition some of the projects, especially that are PSH and might be transitioning to transitional housing. The renewal criteria is also, like I said, they're really trying to not fund the projects that have already been doing this work. So it's really set up to evaluate them on just about anything. And they really, any number of things can reject them from consideration of funding, and a lot of it's on a pass-fail. And so the bar is quite high in terms of funding renewals and new projects. Some of there's a whole page of HUD review items in the risk review. This is only a few of them. They can look to public sources such as newspaper, reports or findings or other things that have merit to disqualify you. They can look at a history of subsidizing or facilitating activities that conflict with this NOFO. And they can look for evidence that the project has previously subsidized or facilitated racial preferences, illegal discrimination, or otherwise use the definition of sex other than as binary in humans, and evidence that the project operates essentially anything under harm reduction. Again, these are just 4 of them. There are quite a number more than this that could disqualify you. So the way that the ranking works is, again, there's 2 tiers. So tier 1 is going to be 30%. In the past, that's been fairly secure, although this year it is still subject to all of those other review criteria. Tier 2 is the remainder of ARD and the amount eligible for new projects. This is all competitive. So that means it competes with all of the other COCs. And so once HUD reaches 30% of your ARD on permanent housing, any more permanent housing in your list simply gets removed. And so that's what I mean by there's not really any incentive to include more than 30%. They're essentially saying you have to reallocate anything beyond 30% because it's not going to be funded. It won't even be considered. So the tier 2 gets scored, each of your projects get scored based on 3 things, one of which is your COC application score. The next is your ranking number, and then the third is whether you have service requirements. That was previously points for Housing First. So it's directly in correlation with your COC score. So tier 2, you know, if we are not able to score very highly, tier 2 is very much at risk for us. Because if folks, you know, have a higher score on a COC application, you know, their projects at the bottom of their tier 2 are going to be more likely to be funded than the ones at the top of our tier 2 if we have a low score. So it's just the way that it's set up is to award projects to those that have higher scores. So the funding outlook, I just want to be very clear that at least 70% of our COC funding could be at risk. Given the just sort of many questions we're not able to score highly on, just I haven't even seen the questions, the application's not available, but just looking at the criteria in the NOFO, there are a number like the pit count and other, like we know we will not receive those points. And so again, the chance of our tier 2 is lower. And they have incorporated many reasons within the NOFO for not funding a project or even any project. So they've included language that allows them to fund no projects at all. Or go through solo applicant processes. So just keep that in mind. Things will happen really quickly. We are expecting RFPs to be released today, barring any delays. So if you are interested in new projects, highly recommend looking at our bid locker website to look at those right away. It will be a very quick turnaround. They are due December 8th. And that is to allow us enough time to review them. And they have to be in 30 days before. The COC committee will be convening and will review renewals. We have already done our intent to renew. That's sort of our local competition for renewals. We always do that ahead of time. Given all of the new criteria, we are going to have to sort of relook at that, change the scoring, and possibly reach out to renewal agencies about other criteria. So we will look at that process. They will also look at reallocation in collaboration with Lane County. We will also be consulting with both Homes for Good and St. Vincent de Paul as our co-applicants. We are meeting with both of them this week to talk about their projects and what they see moving forward. And then the COC committee will complete the ranking. And we anticipate that the PHB will approve ranking and the full application on that January 8th special meeting that we've scheduled. And that's just because we would not be able to have all of that done before the December meeting. There's just no possible way. And it's due prior to the January meeting date. We will post all the timelines, information, all that on the COC website. Hoping to post a lot of that by the end of this week. This is the, as of now, the timeline for all of these processes. Again, this is very, very, very quick. And we do not currently have access to the application or the project applications, and HUD indicated on the webinar that it could be several weeks. So hilarious. So we will have very little time to complete this. Lane County is pulling everybody in who can possibly help to complete, so we will get it done. We do already have, we are moving this to a legal review so that we will know if anything will hold this up. We do have concerns about several items and whether we will be able to sign the application. So we're looking into that first and foremost. Questions about any of that?
I had one.
Lots of things, a lot. But just to summarize, right, we will need to make very strategic decisions. It's normally strategic, but this is like next level mental gymnastics that we're going to have to do to figure out sort of how to maintain a homeless service system that is functional, that has enough options for folks, and figure out where things can be, right, supported with other funding sources, and really think through what makes the most sense. And so we are welcoming input, and, you know, the COC committee has a lot of that burden to take care of those decisions. But if you don't have a conflict of interest and you would like to participate, let me know right away. Or if you have input, we're happy to hear from what folks think is important to them. And we have already instructed agencies, we've met with all the COC agencies and kind of walked this through. And we've sort of told them to start thinking about what they're able to do, willing to do, what they're willing to sort of comply with, and start drafting policies, documentation that support that. And we will leave it to them to determine a plan for sort of communicating those changes to participants and at what time they feel comfortable doing that, probably once we know a little bit more about which projects will continue. Okay. Are you okay on time? I was talking really fine. Read to take a drink of coffee. Comment and you all these questions.
Can I start with a general observation and a question? In other areas, granting and other county programs, where different requirements coming down, we've found ways to change the description of the program or change the titling of the program in order to not change the program itself and not play games, but just change the description to more match what the requirements are without changing the program. I suspect you're looking at that kind of possibility, and the county council has been very helpful with that.
Yeah, I think in some ways, looking at like the equity pieces that, not using the words that they find, find triggering at this point. But I think the other concern is just the way that it is written is that they can look at anything that you've done in the past. And that, we can't sort of change any of that, and we can't change what is out there for them to view.
Well, they'll be wise to game playing, but the things that we're doing aren't abnormal, weird, or unnecessary. And so if there are ways to call them something different while doing the same thing, you'll look at that, I'm certain of that.
Yeah.
And regarding the pit count, we count things differently here. We're more accurate, I think, than most people who are required to do pit counts. So we're being penalized for our own accuracy.
Yeah, and I mean, most folks have not seen a reduction. I mean, we've seen increases in homelessness nationwide, and so most COCs do not see a reduction in that number.
And an increase, actually, I mean, it's counterintuitive. The increase will always triggered the need for more funding. But that being said, I don't know how we could look at the pit counts that we've done historically and say, well, let's really bring these more in line with what other people have, and maybe we can get that 17 points that they're gonna.
Well, it's looking at our past pit counts.
So that's
the ones that have already.
And they'll be scrutinizing that and looking for changes. Okay.
Well, I think, Pat, just to your, sorry, Commissioner Farr, to your previous point, I think an example that Amanda and I have talked about is the county's dedication to gender affirming care. Right. That in and of itself would be against the points, that one category where they, needs to be a man or a woman, basically. There's no navigating that. I mean, I don't see a way that, that the county can, that's not hidden. That's something that we're very proud of and have shared widely. And so I think the worry is they're going to be looking at stuff like that. And there's no way to dance around that. Not saying that we should by any means, but there's just, that's the reality.
A lot to say about that, but not right now.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we get to Genevieve.
Thank you, Sean. And thank you, Amanda. I know it's not fun to talk about that and imagine the implications of it. I do want to make a joke about opening Egan on the night of the pit count again, because that might be the one thing that brings the numbers down as it did that one year. But is there a way that we could actually look at a different partner who's already providing services that maybe aren't as well aligned with the previous priorities of the county and HUD itself? Like, the mission meets all of these criteria. Even like Willamette Valley Treatment and sponsors and things like that. There's places that are more sobriety based, even a little bit faith based, that are already doing the work. And because what I could see that doing is just bringing more dollars to the area for good work, and then bumping up that 30% potential.
Yeah, so the new project opportunities are certainly open to all of those entities. And again, we encourage everyone to look at them. And if the work that you do aligns with these requirements or you feel like it could align, absolutely, we want to see anyone that is interested applying for these opportunities. And so all of those agencies you mentioned, yes, absolutely. In the past, a lot of agencies have, you know, that have not aligned have not been interested in HUD COC funding. Maybe it didn't align with values. There's also just a lot of requirements with HUD COC funding and federal funding. So if those are concerns for you, reach out to us. We can talk through what that looks like and what's involved. And I think just to your point about just another thought, I guess, is that I don't want it to come across as like all of these things are bad necessarily because they didn't align with what we were doing. I would love to see some of these things implemented. I think the challenge is just the expectation of sort of a shift of our entire system in this time frame and without sort of time to think or strategize or plan for it is just unrealistic. Because I wouldn't be against adding transitional housing or SSOs. I think those could be very beneficial to fit into our system. I would love to see that in addition to permanent housing and rapid rehousing, which have also a place. And so I think the difficult part is that those things are replacing what we currently have, and that will ultimately lead to not having options for likely the folks that have very, very high needs who transitional housing is not going to be enough. Yes.
I would just say kind of a statement is that I think a lot of these things smack of privilege. They also speak to me of people who have never spent any time working with this population. And it's ironic because where I work, we were having recovery classes every single day. We were moving people into recovery. But unfortunately, when it was said that we have to lay off all peer support, case management, that went away. You know, so sometimes that funding that we're taking away is directly in conflict with what they're at. I mean, like we were kind of moving towards what they wanted us to do, but you can't do that without those pieces in place. You just can't, you know?
Yeah, I will say that the folks at HUD are not the typical folks that we have been working with. The folks on the webinar are Robert Marbut, who has been involved with homeless policy for a very long time, but has very different views and really very much aligns with sort of the step up models and other, you know, just policy advisors who are new to HUD and have not been involved in the past. So
thank you. I know it's rough for all of us, and I think we're just going to have to be extremely creative in how we kind of overcome some of these barriers and get the services to the people that we serve. Yeah.
Other questions or discussions?
There was a comment I saw pop up.
Chair, I have my hand raised, but it's on top of a
Sorry, we weren't able to see you guys.
of cabinets.
Yeah, go for it.
Not particularly visible. Small yellow hand in front of small yellow cabinets. Thank you, Amanda, for walking us through a lot of information. And I just want to share my appreciation to everyone listening and also participating in these conversations who is grappling with the changing context that we find ourselves in, the circumstances. I am deeply invested in the belief that our community will overcome the circumstances that we're presented with. I think that is a part of who we are in this part of the world and in the relationships and the years of work that we've done in these areas. I really appreciate the observation that communities who have sought to advance previous eras of objectives and do really good work are now being penalized for that good work in this new process. I think it's important that that be stated clearly. I also think that it is incredibly important that we follow up on the action item that your last slide was alluding to, Amanda, and it sounds as though among service providers and conversations among the community of care that there is good work doing to, or good work underway to communicate the circumstances and be as planful as possible. I do also wonder about how this entity, that in some ways, you know, these are the seas that this ship was built for, I'm pretty sure, in the sense that we're responding to a challenge and we're connected already. We don't have to build an entity like the Poverty and Homelessness Board to be able to have this kind of integrated conversation. But I do think it would be very helpful to us as individual jurisdictions and to us collectively if we're able to do a few things. It sounds as though like the first of these might already be underway, but if we could, as components of this whole system, have a tangible sense of the impacts, like the numbers of people, the numbers of services or programs that might be changed, impacted in this work, and those that are short term, and talking with our staff and leadership at the city, certainly. Egan being one of those areas, but also in the medium or longer term, as it relates to housing and housing production expectations within the permanent supportive housing category. Just trying to, as much as is humanly possible, be dispassionate about the counting and the understanding of the implications of these changes. I think that will help us, because I think the next two questions that I would ask after what the tangible impacts of these circumstances are, the next question would be what we can do individually as jurisdictions or entities to mitigate the harms of those changes, and then to bring that together and to be more strategic, because we're very sure, I think we know from all of the information shared today, that we are going to have to find ways to stretch and partner to create service capacity and support that isn't already present. So an understanding of how we could be organized in our efforts to be more strategic, to meet very specific, tangible needs that are created by these decisions. The last thing I want to offer to that, and I would be very open to discussion or feedback from this group, thoughts from people in the room as to like if we need another executive committee meeting in the near term to discuss this and sort of workshop this idea. But the other piece is that looking at these criteria and the changes, I just want to say out loud that it's quite apparent to me that the object of these changes is not outcomes. It's not actual human, impact positively on humans' lives. It's marketing and PR. It's to be able to say that certain things have happened because data now shows it that way, or to be able to say that certain programs are being funded and supported while other things are not. And for that reason, as we are responding to this application, I think it will be very important to annotate that application in a way that helps people to see how this is not actually helping our communities. This is not going to help the country if all communities of care are now being forced through an application process like this. So that is an additional ask. Certainly, it wouldn't have to happen in the timeline attached to this application process, but I think we are going to be responsible for communicating reality when the structure and focus has changed and very much wants to communicate a different story. And from my perspective, that story does not seem focused on community benefits or helping people in their lives to achieve stability. It seems like a much different kind of a rhetoric. So those are my observations to the group. But again, I want to appreciate staff's presentation of this information and encourage us to use the system that we have here to chart our own path.
Well stated, Mayor.
Thank you.
say to that, to a couple of points. I think we will certainly put together sort of what the impacts are as we kind of have those discussions around reallocation, which projects might continue, how many households that might affect, and really think through those numbers and provide that information out when we have it. We have some, general idea of how many people are served, but we just don't know, right, which projects will remain or not. So we will get that out as soon as we have that information and can understand. The state is also asking about that information. So I know the state of Oregon is also looking at sort of all of the COCs and how this might impact statewide. And so this is on their radar as well. All of the Oregon COCs are meeting together to talk about strategies, what we're all doing, and how this might impact. So that is happening. There was another point. Oh, in terms of, yes, the strategies going forward for the board, I think, we just did that strategic planning process. A lot of that certainly feels like it can't continue in this moment with having to address some of what is created by this application. But I do think there's opportunity, right, to think about, other funding sources, the funding collaborative that is suggested, local funding and other sources that we'll need to supplement, and how we sort of better use state funding in collaboration with other funding. We might need to rethink sort of how we allocate things, and that's just a discussion I would encourage you all to have.
Thank you, Amanda, for that eye-opening breakdown of this new process. And I agree. I think partnerships at this time, I think a little bit like Sherry was talking about, the partnerships between the service providers who have been doing supportive housing in the previous model, and maybe those partnerships with, agencies or behavioral health providers who actually do treatment, to see if there's opportunities for collabs of them working together to maintain some of the system, and also that piece of making the community aware that looking at the big picture, we're looking at, we might not make it past just because our state's alignments and the alignments with HUD are, well, misaligned to that we might be impacted before we can even get to one project. And like, what does that look like for the community? Because we can talk about if we make it past that hurdle and we're at the 30% of what that would look like, but there is the potential, which it's out of our hands of, depending on how they're looking at it, that the application might not even get through that hurdle, the first hurdle.
I think the wait between January and May is going to be very.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And where we need to know and start looking at, like you said, what are our plans B, C, and D, depending on what the outcome.
Hope for the best and plan for, what might happen.
And I'll send out as follow-up a link to the National Alliance's to End Homelessness webinar yesterday, where they talked about the NOFO. It's largely what Amanda talked about, but I think just tapping into them as a resource to help explain this on a national level and the impacts that are affecting, not just our community, but other communities is valuable.
Hi, Commissioner.
Just a very one sentence about following up on what Mayor Knudsen said. These conditions have been precipitated down on us, and there are very little things that we can do other than let the rain fall. But what we can do in the meantime is document closely, as Mayor Knudsen says, help the effect on people, and help people to understand and to see that this is not helping the country. The net result of what we're going to go through, and we are going to go through some stuff that we don't, the stuff that we're describing now, keep track of it. And as we move forward, that way we can absolutely accurately demonstrate and state how this is not helping the country. And the danger is there are good marketers on the other side who will be telling people how it is helping the country all along. And they won't have the benefit, and it's a horrible benefit to have, of seeing the people actually who are affected, that we will see.
Great, thank you. And I'm gonna get Genevieve, and then Mayor Knudsen and I will go to you, and then we'll transition. You can make your statement, and then we'll transition to the jurisdictional updates, which I think would be if you have anything to add to that. Go ahead, Genevieve.
I just want to circle back to James's information on state funding as well, because there's a hundreds of $1 million Medicaid gap coming down the pipeline, and HRSN I think is only funded through 2027, and with all of the things. So I just want to be as supportive of as I can of the idea of alternative funding avenues, because I think that they are going to be very, very necessary, and we're going to have to get pretty creative because this is kind of going to come from all sides. So not to be a pessimist, but.
Yeah.
Mayor Knudsen?
This is a simple question, because it was just mentioned. We will know the outcome of this application process next May of 2026, June.
No.
How does any of this, or does this at all in any way, connect with the other assessment that Lane County went through, in this past year, where we were honestly surprised by some of the sort of average marks in areas in relationship to federal programs and federal work that we would have thought, like, we would have been more competitive in a different time. Is there any connection to this process and that kind of assessment in terms of understanding where other communities of care are, and really which other communities of care across the country are also similarly imperiled by this shift?
I'm not sure I know what you're referencing, Mayor, and I don't know if Amanda does either. The other process being what process?
Oh, I'm sorry that I can't pull the proper name from the top of my mind. It was our Lane County assessment relative to it was a federal assessment of our programs, and there were a few areas where this is probably from early last summer. We might have had this presentation at PHB.
Maybe it was the last COC application from fiscal year 24, maybe?
It could have been.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if there's some way that we could get an idea of who else right now is facing this exact same problem.
Oh, yes.
Like what other communities, if you were just say to like, who is in our cohort, who is in this network, and who does not yet realize the ways in which their communities are being imperiled by these shifts, that could be also very important information for us to have to just be effective in our own community conversation.
Yeah, I'll tell you, all of the COCs are definitely talking. The NAH webinar had over 3,000 people on it. The COCs are very concerned, particularly we've heard from other Oregon COCs as well as California, who, folks that are in these sanctuary states are concerned about being eligible at all, and feeling targeted by a lot of the things in there. So certainly many, if not all COCs are concerned. There are also balance of states or, a full state COCs that are affected even more negatively by this, in that, they have to decide which PSH is open across a very large geography. So there are just things that are even more impactful depending on the type of COC you have as well. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but.
It's very helpful, and I will also pull some of that information, but thank you for that background.
And with that, Mayor, do you have any jurisdictional updates that you would like to share?
I do not today. Thank you again for these presentations. Really important information for us to have.
Do we have any other representatives from other jurisdictions? I don't
Mayor
think so.
Mayor Van Gordon had to pop
Yeah,
off.
he left.
Commissioner
Farr, sorry. My brain is just swimming with information right now.
A lot.
I've been talking more than anybody else, but we had a number of things to report on. The stabilization center is moving forward, and at some point we could have maybe Brittany come and give us an update on that. We're still working on the land as we have the land identified. There's still resistance from the neighbors, which we can expect. But we're moving forward with it and in partnership with Peace Health and looking forward to something that I'd hoped would open 2 years ago will probably open 2 years from now. But it'll dot a lot more I's and cross a lot more T's than initially we planned. So nothing much more to say about that.
Thank you very much. James, do you want to just do?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone has any feedback they want to give regarding the October workshops, the trauma-informed care workshops, I'm happy to hear that now. I also recognize there's 4 minutes and this was a very dense, heavy meeting. So, but please, I know there were opportunities provided via survey as well, but just want to appreciate everyone's participation in those. And hopefully it was a valuable use of your time. And then I just want to highlight, it was mentioned by Amanda, but it didn't make it into the agenda, that we are having that special meeting of the PHB on January 8th. And so hopefully you all received that email. And if you can confirm whether or not you can attend, that'll help with just ensuring we get to quorum. And then I guess I would leave it to the chairs to, in regard to Mayor Knutson's question about whether this entity needs to meet again before then either. But we at least will have that January 8th special meeting.
Yes.
I'm not opposed to a separate meeting if we need to have such, whether it be of the chairs or of the executive committee or a subset of the executive committee.
Yeah. Especially Amanda, if you are able to get any answers through the FAQ from the federal government about some of the questions that have come up where that we have concern as to whether it's going to impact our whole submission or partial of our submission, that we might need to pull everybody together. I think the more clarity that we have around what could be the impact, and the quicker that we can start planning.
Yeah, I'll certainly be transparent about any responses I get, especially if they provide more information than we have or change what our thinking is. And I have requested that the legal review, at least pre-review, be completed by December 17th so that we have that information prior to the next PHB.
And even if we don't have that, I think the January 15th meeting, once everything is submitted, would be the opportunities for us to really get started planning on all the extra plans that we will have to create, since we will know by April or May, and then contracts in June with the new, so we will have a very short period once we hear back from them of next steps. Okay. And with that, I think, oh, no, I'm not going to do a big wrap up other than to remind everybody that the next meeting is December 18th. That's the all-member meeting. So hopefully everybody will be available. If you are not available or thoughts or things coming in between time, James, I absolutely volunteered you.
Yeah. That's my job, yeah.
For you to reach out to James or send emails to James. So Amanda, you can have a little bit of breathing room right now. And then with that, we will adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everyone.